All right, so get this right. We are diving into some seriously thought-provoking stuff today. You ever stumble across something that, like, totally reshapes how you see the world?
I mean, like, changes everything.
Exactly. That's how I felt after watching that video essay you sent over. Cyberpunk will destroy nationalism and globalism. This Pilgrims Pass creator, they're onto something.
Yeah. What did you think of their whole thing about cyberpunk being like a prediction?
It's not just a cool aesthetic, right? It's a prediction of this future they call, get this, Neomedievalism.
It's a fascinating take. The video uses cyberpunk to kind of dissect what's happening in geopolitics right now.
Yeah.
You got globalism on one side, nationalism on the other, but they're suggesting they might both be going down. Like, what's next?
Right.
And it might be something different.
Something more like fragmented. The video really makes the point that cyberpunk worlds are practically built on these mega corporations that have as much power as governments.
More, even.
Yeah, more. Throw in blurred national borders, everyone fighting for resources. It really does feel kind of medieval.
It's not about a literal return to castles and knights, though.
Right.
Neo-medievalism here is more about a return to decentralization. Imagine powerful city-states, not nations, as the major players with corporations, right? And they're calling the shots. Mercenaries, shifting loyalties, that kind of thing. It's definitely different from how we do things now.
It's funny you should say that because they actually use Samsung as an example in the video.
Oh, really?
They talk about how this Korean company is building massive facilities in the US. It's almost like they're creating their own little world.
I mean, it's not that far-fetched. Think about it. What happens when the usual power structures start to weaken?
Someone has to step in.
Exactly.
Okay.
A vacuum is created, and right now, corporations seem more than ready to step into that void. The decline of the middle class, the gap between the haves and the have-nots, that's all part of it.
That makes me think of another thing they talked about, those 4 archetypes of power. Warriors, merchants, priests, and then kind of out of left field bureaucrats. Why use that to understand power?
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. They're claiming that these 4 groups have always been fighting for power. It's like a timeless death match.
Wow.
What we might be seeing now is a comeback for the warriors, the merchants, and the priests.
And the bureaucrat is.
Out of luck.
It's interesting because globalism and nationalism, they need centralized control, right?
For sure. Global organizations, strong nations. There's definitely a bureaucracy element.
That's like the opposite of what the video is talking about.
Exactly. But there's all this distrust in institutions now, this desire for autonomy. It's kind of the perfect setup for those other archetypes to make a move.
They did not hold back on the whole bureaucrat thing, though. A little harsh, maybe.
Well, we're just unpacking what the video says. It's important to engage with different opinions, right?
Yeah, of course.
Even if we don't agree with them all. But the creator does raise a valid point. Are there unintended consequences to too much bureaucracy? Have we become so focused on control that we've stifled, I don't know, innovation and agency? Those are good questions.
It's weird, right? Like, we're almost hardwired to juggle multiple identities. Even the video creator was talking about their own background, Italian and Brazilian Catholic faith as a perfect example. It's like how much of that shapes how we see the world.
Yeah, and that whole fragmentation thing, as jarring as it sounds, could be a strength in this neo-medieval world.
Yeah.
Like, if one thing collapses, you've got other communities, other networks to fall back on.
It's less about pledging allegiance to one big thing, like a country.
Right.
And more about, I don't know, having your fingers in a lot of pies.
Exactly. Spreading your bets, diversifying your portfolio of allegiances. If the old ways of doing things are gone, you got to be adaptable, you got to have strong networks. That's where those archetypes, warriors, merchants, priests, they come back in. It's their kind of skills and mindsets that matter in this new world.
So are we stocking up on canned goods now? Learning to code on the black market? What are we doing?
Well, the video does point out some downsides.
Right.
More freedom could mean less stability, less security.
Oh, for sure.
The old power structures vanish. Could be a recipe for chaos, right? Everyone fighting for control.
They made some pretty scary comparisons to Rome collapsing, with the power struggles and everything. And what they said about private armies makes you think twice, right?
Something to consider for sure. But hey, remember, they're not saying it's going to happen for sure. It's more about getting us to think about possibilities, right? We're not locked into one future or another. It all depends what we do.
So less of a prophecy and more of a...
Call to action.
Exactly. Like, how do we deal with this future, you know? How do we make sure we're good no matter what?
It's about asking the right questions, right? What should we be learning? What communities should we be a part of? If this neo-medieval world favors certain types of people, where does that leave everyone else? It's worth thinking about.
Makes you think about leadership, too. It's not just presidents and CEOs anymore.
Right.
Could be anyone, really. Tech people, community leaders, even like influencers online who can bring people together.
Totally. The video even talked about digital communities becoming like those old medieval guilds, each with their own thing, their own rules.
It does make you wonder, though. Technology can connect us, but it can also divide us, you know?
Absolutely.
It's a double-edged sword. We can use it to build bridges, or we can use it to build walls.
Which is why, more than ever, we need to think critically, right? Be careful about the information we consume, the communities we join.
And remember that even if everything feels like it's breaking apart, we're all in this together. It's still our world.
Well said.
You know, it's funny. I never really thought about cyberpunk and like religion together, but now that you mention it, it makes sense. If the world is uncertain, people want something solid to hold on to.
Right. Like, look at medieval times. The church was a source of stability when everything else was chaotic. Maybe we'll see something similar happen again, even if it's not exactly the same. It's a thought, right?
And the video makes it clear this isn't some fantasy, you know? They point to things happening right now. Private cities, those online communities that are like their own little worlds.
And remember how they talked about those online communities maybe becoming like medieval guilds?
Yeah.
People with the same interests, forming groups, making their own rules. It kind of makes you think, huh.
It's exciting, but kind of scary too, right? I mean, more freedom would be great. Communities built around what you care about, not just where you live. But what if it goes too far? Like those dystopian cyberpunk stories.
It's about finding a balance. We can't just ignore the downsides. Like that quote from Dune, the concept of progress acts as a protective mechanism to shield us from the terrors of the future. Makes you think, right?
So where does this leave us? How do we deal with a world where everything's changing? Cyberpunk can be kind of bleak, but is there anything we can learn from it?
Well, the future isn't set in stone. Every decision we make, every connection we form, it all shapes what's to come. The best thing we can do is stay curious, stay adaptable, and never forget that we're all in this together.
Building those bridges, fostering connections, approaching the future, I don't know, with our eyes open, but with a sense of hope. A lot to think about, that's for sure. But as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Absolutely. Keep those brains buzzing, everyone.
Till next time.